us now to analyze the coverage. Molly Hemingway, editor-in-chief of The Federalist and in Los Angeles. Leslie Marshall, the radio talk show host. Both are Fox News contributors. Molly, it's no secret that most journalists are pro-choice. Do you think major news organizations are being fair in the way they're framing this reversal of Roe, given that it returns the decision to elected officials in each state?
You know, the whole reason I got interested in media criticism was because I saw early on how the media portrayed the abortion debate. They're so one-sided. The language they choose, the way that they, what they choose to describe and what they choose not to describe. And so it is in no way surprising the way that they covered this return of abortion law to the people, but they did a very bad job of accurately conveying what the decision says, what it signifies, and what American people think about it.
Leslie, no matter how strongly you and others feel that the decision is wrong, and when someone like AOC saying the ruling is illegitimate, is it fair for commentators to be attacking the Supreme Court? And you can respond to Molly's point as well.
Absolutely. Isn't that our First Amendment right? Isn't that our First Amendment right to speak against a court that is not elected by we the people? And with all due respect to Molly, who I like personally and professionally, even though we may not agree on much, I think we could find something we agree on. I don't agree that this is going back to the people. This is going to states. We have 41 bans, and we have 26 states. 10 of those states will not have any exceptions for rape or incest. We can get to that discussion later. And then, of course, there are the rumblings of Republicans, if they become in power in the House and the Senate, and certainly if they get the presidency in the next general election, having a federal ban on abortion. And, of course, we all read, I think, Justice Thomas's plans to go further.
Leslie, let me just interrupt.
This isn't about the American people.
Molly says the coverage has been unfair for a long time. It is unfair today. Your take on that, please.
I don't believe that the coverage has been unfair. I think that the coverage echoes the sentiment of the American people.
By the way, I've noticed that when a decision in any court goes the way you don't like, Supreme Court, you say it's unelected judges. Well, the 1973 Roe decision was also made by unelected judges.
And in fact, that's the entire point of this decision. What happened in 1973 is that the decision was taken away from the American people. We saw 50 years of so much trauma related to people falsely alleging that this was a constitutional right. Alito's decision goes into great detail about how there's nothing in the Constitution about this, nothing in common law about this, and how this is a decision that should be left to the people. And that is precisely what this decision does. It allows people at their state legislatures or through ballot initiatives to set what abortion law will be.
Well, Molly, I mean, the High Court in '73 found a constitutional right, and it was controversial at the time, and it remained. And that brings me actually to, this is sort of the culmination of a half-century effort by the pro-life movement to stop what its members view as killing babies. But you're not going to see many glowing profiles of the leaders of the movement, as happened, for example, 7 years ago when the court legalized same-sex marriage.
Right, and there were so many people who worked so hard. I mean, because this was a 50-year battle, there are people who didn't even survive to see this day. It was the conservative judicial movement, Christians and Catholics and other religious people, people who are just human rights advocates who oppose the violence of abortion. This is a wonderfully successful story, but the way that you see it framed in most major corporate media is something that is reflecting their own personal leftist bias.
Well, Leslie, for those who believe deeply in a woman's right to choose, the 1973 decision was the correct one. So there's a media argument here. I know you've seen it, maybe you agree with it, that the court is out of step with public opinion. But isn't it the court at various times often out of step with public opinion? For example, Brown versus Board of Ed was not wildly popular, the school desegregation order.
Yes, but in 1973, when you look at Roe v. Wade and when you look at who wrote the opinion, that was a Republican, Richard Nixon at the time, appointee. And what I have seen, and honestly, I feel I would say this if I were a Republican and not a Democrat. And I don't care if this is left or right, I think it's wrong. There's a reason that Lady Justice has a scale, because justice is supposed to be balanced. It's also supposed to be blind, hence the blindfold across her eyes. And what I'm seeing, whether left or right, are courts that are making decisions that benefit political parties more. And that, to me, is wrong. And that, to me, is unconstitutional. And, of course, the can of worms is what the concern is. It's, when Wiley speaks about, we have people here in California, and as you know, it's now part of the California Constitution. But federal law trumps state. And we have people, not just here in California, but throughout the country, that that are very vocal about this is not the end for them, because it wasn't. Some people will say this is just about taking the power away from, the Constitution should be in the Constitution given to the states. No, that is not the goal for a lot. I would dare say most of these people. The goal is to have abortion be illegal in the United States. That goes backwards.
It is absolutely true that human rights advocates do oppose the violence of abortion, that they do want to protect women and their children, that they don't want people to not have a right to life. That is a very important thing for all human rights advocates who care deeply about women and their children. But the decision was something else also, which is what the Constitution says. And this is why I wish people in the media would actually know enough to read the decision, to understand what it says. It argues in depth about how there never was a constitutional right to abortion. It's obviously never mentioned there. Just knowing the basic facts and knowing what Alito says and what he doesn't say would be so helpful for this conversation.
Under our system of government, the Constitution says ultimately what the Supreme Court says it said. And obviously, there have been different decisions since Roe, including the Casey decision in 1992. Let me ask you this. Some liberal pundits are saying that this shows, and we've talked about this before, that Senate confirmation hearings are a meaningless ritual, that everyone vows to respect precedent, and then, as in this case, you have 5 justices with John Roberts concurring, but he didn't want to go all the way on Roe, to throw out this 50-year precedent, critics would say based on ideology. Senator Susan Collins said that Brett Kavanaugh, I know you covered and wrote a book about his confirmation hearings, misled her with what he said privately about where he would be, not how he would vote, but giving the signal that he deeply respected the Roe precedent.
Yeah, Carrie Severino and I did cover this in our book on the Kavanaugh confirmation. And you hear many people say, oh, well, if you respect precedent, that means you can never get rid of Roe v. Wade. Well, everyone agreed that Roe v. Wade was very bad law, including Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who said that it was a horribly decided opinion. Yeah. Not that she didn't support abortion,
agreed.
But, well, it was obviously not a strong decision. It was already kind of overruled in Casey, and here now finally in Roe or in Dobbs, it's fully overruled. But if you actually go back to the transcripts and if you actually see what people said, they never ever weigh in on future cases. They will always say they respect precedent, and they do. And again, Alito's decision gets into this. He lists 5 reasons why precedent can't be something that you hold to in the face of common law, the clear constitutional understanding, and other reasons. And he explains it in detail.
Leslie, in painting this ruling as extreme, and you touched on this briefly earlier, there's been a very sharp media focus on the lack of an exception for rape or incest, and women or girls having to bring those babies to term. If you're in a state where abortion is illegal and for whatever reason you can't travel, you have to give birth. And I think it goes to why we're seeing such emotional reactions on both sides, of course, but particularly from the pro-choice side. Take that.
I think you all know, because I've shared it before, I'm the victim of rape. I was not impregnated. If I was, I don't know the decision I would make. I have 2 children. I have a son and a daughter. My daughter's 14. God forbid she were ever in that position that I was. I just, I cry for these girls. I cry for not just my children, my grandchildren. People say, oh, it's 1 or 2%. 1% is 7,000 women or girls that have been victims. And 1 in 10 rapes is not reported, and often incest is not reported. When you look at the 10 states that don't have exceptions, Howard, they have the highest infant mortality rates in the United States. We have a very broken foster care system across the board in this country. We don't have enough funds in many states for proper education, for proper health care, for feeding of these children, so that is a concern.
All right. A lot more to say about this, obviously, and strong feelings, as I said, on both sides and on this panel. Now let's look at the coverage of the political battle that erupted the minute the High Court struck down Roe v. Wade. So Molly Hemingway, with the abortion now in the process of becoming illegal in 26 states. Do you see the media covering these political fights at the local level with an emphasis on preserving the right of women to travel to states where it is legal, or to get by mail these abortion-inducing pills? In fact, big front page story, New York Times today, abortion pills to take spotlight as states impose bans.
I think first off, the really bad thing that we saw in the media coverage was just not accurately conveying what the Dobbs decision does in returning it to the states, each state being able to set its own laws, each state having, many of them have made provisions in the case something like this happened, and what those debates will be.
The trigger laws, yeah.
But just in general, actually, I think that too much of the debate is focused on too little of the discussion. This is a really complicated issue. Women and their children and their partners, and we focus so much and leave out the entire story of unborn children. I mean, you never see corporate media asking questions like, do you think it should be legal to kill a baby just because she has Down syndrome? Or do you think it should be legal to kill a baby just because she's going to be a girl instead of a boy? These are very real issues that are not, that people don't ask. I don't hear enough people say, do you think abortion should be legal through all 9 months of pregnancy, right until the day of birth? I mean, that's a very important question to ask politically, and the way it's being framed is not being framed that's giving full weight to the complications here.
Right. Of course, Leslie, I'm sure you have a different view of that phrase, to kill a baby, but you can come back to that. But let me ask you this question. I was struck that Donald Trump, who, of course, appointed 3 of the justices that formed the 5 for core majority in overturning Roe, took full credit, saying, I did not cave to the radical left Democrats or their partners in the fake news media. But Trump did not denounce abortion, just said it will work out well for everybody, which made me think that he's not the only Republican who's nervous now about the impact on the election among Republicans who, whether they like Trump or not, are not happy about losing Roe.
Well, chameleons technically take on the color of their background, right? I believe it was one of his ex-wives, Marla Maples, who said that he had asked her when she became pregnant to have an abortion, if you believe her account in her book. Look, I'm not surprised, and politicians do this on both sides of the aisle, Howard. They push for certain pieces of legislation, or they push for certain constitutional rights. One of the bigger issues here is this is the first constitutional right, whether you believe it's constitutional right or not, that has been taken away. And I will agree with something Molly said about questions. Yeah. I will agree with something Molly said.
Let's have that.
I did not interrupt when you were talking, my friend. When she said that there are other questions. Here's a question I have. This seems to put everything on the female, right? Female shouldn't get pregnant. If the female gets pregnant, let's leave rape and incest out of it for a minute, she, in more than half of the states in this country, has to bring that child to term. So if she has to bring that child to term, and if she doesn't or can't give the child up for adoption or foster care, where is the responsibility, Howard, of the man, of the father? Are
Father
these
should
states
absolutely,
going to enact legislation?
Father should absolutely be part
agree.
of this discussion and have a stake in this. But I'm short on time. I want to get a brief answer from each of you. When Politico, Molly, first obtained this draft opinion, media liberals warned that the High Court wouldn't stop there. They would try to throw out other rulings. And I thought that was speculative and went too far. But in Clarence Thomas's opinion, yes, it's one single justice, he says the court should revisit decisions on same-sex marriage and contraception. So with the earlier media warnings on target.
Well, the issue that Clarence Thomas was talking about there is how you come to a decision and not just that you've come to a decision. Mm-hmm. And so if the means by which you come to a decision is flawed, you should revisit those issues.
Leslie, now we're facing a divided country when it comes to abortion. Mike Pence has immediately called for a total nationwide ban. Mitch McConnell, when this thing first leaked, said it's possible Republicans, if they take over Congress, would move for a nationwide ban. So are the media casting this as the issue or a very important issue for the midterms?
It is a very important issue for the midterms. Sadly, my party, the Democrats, don't show up in the numbers Republicans do in the midterms. And, you know, I don't think they understood when we said in 2016, look how many Supreme Court seats might come up. You can't just stay home, oh, but her emails. The bottom line here is people have to get on vote. I get so angry when I see these marches. That's wonderful. You're upset. We get it. But stop marching. Start voting. And there's going to be more, Howard. I mean, there are going to be boycotts of these 26 states and products made in these states. I mean, the list goes on. But that threat and that fear is not Hollywood. It's very real. My bet is we're going to see if Republicans get into control a federal ban on abortion.
Leslie Marshall, Molly Hemingway, thanks very much for joining us this Sunday.